Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I am Eldridge Charles. Today we have three members of the opposition to speak in depth on issues affecting migration, crime, and tourism. We go first to the leader of the opposition, Honorable Alan Shastney, to speak on the impact of the CIP program on the island's visa-free access to the Schengen area and the nation's international allies. Leader of the opposition, welcome. Coming out of your press conference, I listened to a lot of the points you made, and I realized that some of these issues are not new. You've voiced these things before. The first point I want to expound upon is the notion that the CIP program should have a regional, should be regional, that the CIP program should benefit everybody in the region. And I think you first made a statement towards a regional integration on crime during your speech in Trinidad, correct? Yes. So you spoke about all the countries assisting the RSS. Do you think that assistance can come from the CIP? What exactly is your vision for a regional CIP program?
So the CIP program currently is all of the OECS member states, with the exception of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Anguilla, and the BVI. So it has long been my expectation, from a functional perspective, and also understanding the concerns countries who give us visa-free access have. So, the question is, are we selling the access to their countries, or are we selling our citizenship? And I think we already know what the answer to that question is. If we did not have the visa-free access, more than likely people would not want to have our citizenship programs. So it means that we must be cognizant of what their concerns are. And they have been expressing their concerns for a very long time. It's not just today. So one of the ways to mitigate their concerns would have to have made this an OECS program. And why an OECS program? Because the benefit of the citizenship is not just for St. Lucia. It's for all of the OECS, based on our agreement that we have, the Basse-Terre Agreement. So imagine, if you would, that instead of applying to St. Lucia or you're applying to an individual country, you're actually applying to the OECS Secretariat for citizenship of the OECS. And it could be any one of the countries that you would get citizenship. You can choose which one that you want to be a citizen of, right? But the background checks, the security checks, the collections of monies, and the integrity of the program would be maintained independently of governments on their behalf. When the countries had not agreed to such a deliberate integration, it was agreed that the governor of the central bank, as well as the general secretary of the OECS, would work together to try to create a singular program of a common standard. Sadly, it's not until the Europeans and the UK have moved and taken away visa access to Dominica that all of a sudden people now have realized that this is a real threat.
Let me ask you, we heard last year that the UK started pulling visa-free access to some of their former colonies. How has St. Lucia been affected? Have we lost our visa-free access, or is this still up in the air? Has the situation been rectified?
We still have our access to the UK, but England has taken away the immediate visa access for Dominica and have made them now apply to get visas. And I know that has significantly impacted their CIP program. I think that the meeting that the Prime Minister is attending in Brussels is either to tell the OECS that there's no more visa, or that there's going to be an application for visas online. And then probably warn them that if there is not a strengthening of the security and the integrity of the programs, that there will be further restrictions, which the worst one being that you have to apply for a visa to go to those countries. So while the CIP program can be beneficial to all of us, and there are examples of how it has been beneficial. If it is mismanaged, then it becomes a detriment, because St. Lucians now will be put in a worse position. So St. Lucians have to go to Barbados and pay for an airfare, sometimes pay for a hotel. People have to spend weeks, if not months, waiting in anticipation as to whether they're going to get an appointment. And even after they get the appointment, they have to wait a period of time before they even get their approvals. So it's already getting more and more difficult. And if we think it's tough enough now, if in fact the US, Canada, UK, and Europe decide that St. Lucia and the OECS are too much of a risk, then it's going to become even more difficult, if not impossible, to be able to get visa access to these countries.
Let's explore the regional CIP hypothetically in terms of national security. And that was one of the main points that you brought across as to why this meeting would even be taking place. You spoke about the national security of the countries that we have agreements with, the 165 countries that we currently have visa-free access to. And I think your point was that by selling our CIP program and not having a proper vetting mechanism in place, that we could potentially be putting the national security of these countries at risk. Now, you also spoke about people being rejected for CIP programs of other countries, and then having the access to the CIP program of another OECS territory. In terms of national security of OECS countries, and you also spoke about the OECS countries like St. Vincent, who do not believe in CIP programs, who have never supported the move, they are also being affected through the CSME agreement, the free movement of people throughout the OECS and throughout CARICOM. So, put it in perspective for St. Lucians who may not be clear on why the European territories might not want a CIP program. Put it in perspective in terms of national security. How can a CIP program potentially affect these countries?
So we had the great example that when the Ukraine war broke out, and Europe and the UK and the Western world put on some pretty significant sanctions against Russians and Iranians. So here it was is that some of the OECS countries were still accepting applications for citizenship from those persons. So if they could not do business in Europe or United States or United Kingdom because of those sanctions, they could now become a citizen in St. Lucia or one of the OECS countries and apply to do business under that citizenship and not their previous citizenship. They could travel to UK and Europe without getting a visa. So it exposes the risk that's associated. Do we have enough ability to review, analyze all of the applications that we were getting from those countries and to give the Europeans and everybody else the satisfaction that these are good people? I don't know. I would say to you, very difficult. And certainly impossible if we don't include the Europeans. So when the information goes to the RSS in Barbados, as an example, they have access to all of the Interpol and all of the individual databases around the world, security databases, so they can cross-check those persons. So when we hear right now that those files have not been going to the RSS, plus we're accepting countries that are on a blacklist that the Western world has, and what we're selling is access to their countries, there's something fundamentally wrong. And that's why there is a clampdown. I want to say to you, elders, there's a very important word here. It's called integrity. Okay, so let me give you an example of integrity. The current Deputy Prime Minister was involved in a situation in the UK when he was the High Commissioner, where a Saudi Arabian billionaire was given a diplomatic status by being made the ambassador to the IMO, International Maritime Organization. No experience. And it was later found out that the reason why he was given that citizenship was to assist him in getting immunity against his ex-wife suing him for her divorce. And that the government of St. Lucia did everything that they could to protect his immunity, even though what he was going to court with had nothing to do with his job. We found out that there was a joint account opened up, and that the Auditor General confirmed that no application had been made to the Ministry of Finance or to the Controller to get permission to open up that account. That monies had been transferred to that same person. I question the integrity of the individual. Today, that same individual is in charge of the CIP program. And we see things that are being done and changes that are being made to the program that question the integrity of everyone. Because he is arguing that the damage to the CIP program was done when we lowered the price to $100,000. Let's get this right. It was $200,000, but everybody else in the region was selling at $100,000. So you're not going to be successful. St. Lucia agreed to match everybody else's prices, but had been working to raise that price collectively. We also encouraged the General Secretary. We encouraged the Governor of the Central Bank. We encouraged that there should be an OECS program and to raise our entire standards. I am proud of the fact that we were the ones that really set up the processes to apply and to keep the RSS and impacts informed of everything that we were doing. So not only were we sending the applications through them, we were giving them a list of those persons that applied. We gave them the status, meaning if they had been rejected and why they were rejected. If somebody had been given a citizenship and we rejected them afterwards, they were informed all the time because we are part of their security process. We had to make sure that that was the case. That's not what this government is doing. This government currently is allowing people to sell the real estate program for less than the $200,000. And now the new infrastructure program, which they have not explained to the people of St. Lucia, they've published an SI, they've given us no explanation as to how the program is going to run. They have not told us who the agent is in the infrastructure program, but what we do know is that they're selling it for $100,000. And what we also know is that that $100,000 does not come to the state, but goes directly to whoever the developer is. We also have evidence to show that that developer is currently selling that program in the marketplace for $80,000 and sometimes even less. This is the issue. So the government is making a false allegation as to why they think they cannot sign on to the program and raise the price to $200,000, and more importantly, to make sure that the program has integrity, that what we say it is what it's going to be. So there's a lot of complaints out there right now, and if in fact you're underselling it, are you also now reducing the standards of your security background check? And that's the problem. So a large part as to why the Europeans and the Americans want it to be at $200,000 is a process of screening and creating a new standard for the CIP program.
Just explain quickly, because we're coming to an end of our interview, but I want you to leave St. Lucians with a deeper understanding of the program, the OECS CIP agreement that St. Lucia neglected to sign on to. Just give us a quick rundown of what that agreement entailed.
So the program basically entails, first of all, the security process, to have a common standard. So how are the background checks going to be done? Are the background checks going to be done by the regional organizations? What is an accepted security risk that people are willing to tolerate? How are you going to keep things documented is also going to be part of the common process. And even more importantly now is a price. So it was agreed that every single country would sell the donation for $200,000, which means that the amount that's going to be charged for the real estate program is going to have to be even higher than that. Proper record keeping, and that the OECS itself should be involved in doing general audits of all of the documentation. So again, it's to create a common standard and a mechanism to make sure that there's an audit process, that there's integrity to the program, that is validated, and at all times that the security standard would be to the level that the US, UK, Canada, and Europe want. Whatever is the highest standard, that becomes the minimum standard. So that's very, very, very important. And I think that we also owe it to CARICOM, because there are CARICOM countries that are not participating in the CIP program, in which our citizens now can travel to those countries. They would have to know that their regional organizations have vetted these people.
Thank you. When we come back, we have the Deputy Leader, Guy Joseph, who will explore the crime situation on island and how the government's recent policies affect crime fighting in St. Lucia.
Lucilex remote options are available to serve you every weekday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Call or send a WhatsApp message to 285-6796, 285-7859, 285-3593, 285-3329, or 285-8640. Or send an email to customersupport@lucilec.com for assistance. Lucilec encourages you to use the available options for doing business with us remotely.
Ice candy, deliciously healthy.
Why pay full price for your mobile when you can pay half? Just bundle your home internet and mobile services with Flow and save 50% on your mobile bill. That's money in your pockets every month. Plus now you get free YouTube and WhatsApp data. And you can share your plan with up to 3 other numbers. Upgrade now and get a free smartphone. Switch and keep your number. Learn more at discoverflow.co.
Welcome back. We're here with Deputy Leader of the UWP, Guy Joseph, who is going to be speaking with us on the subject of crime. Good day, Mr. Joseph, and happy birthday. So, in a very short space of time, less than 48 hours, we've had 4 murders. Our murder rate has jumped from 24 to 28. You spoke about the effectiveness and the effectiveness in solving drug-related crimes of the K9 unit. You also spoke about the low maintenance of that unit. But you also spoke about licensed firearms and the vetting process associated with issuing these firearms. Let's start with that. The 4 murders that were just committed, 3 of them were gun-related crimes. Do you believe that having a stronger vetting process for licensed firearms can positively impact the gun crimes and the gun violence that have been happening in St. Lucia so far?
I don't necessarily think the point I was making is not in direct relation to this, because people don't usually use their legal firearms to commit crimes. Most people who would use their legal firearm would be in self-defense or for protection of family or property or things of that nature. I think most of the crimes that we are seeing, all of the gun-related crimes, are really illegal firearms. And I think the problem we have is in securing our borders, in the processing at the ports. I mean, we've seen a number of events take place. We saw the amount of ammunition and guns that came in the barrels. We saw the ones that came in at the bottom of the fridge some time ago. And we are not hearing what is happening. There is no way these things can land in St. Lucia and it cannot be traced back to where it came from. Because I ship barrels, I do different things, I ship a box, I ship anything from the US, I have to go and pay. There must be a name that it is assigned to, and there must be a name that it is coming from. You know, these things are not, you don't need a high level of investigation to track down. I mean, if guns are coming from other countries and are entering at ports that are not designated ports of entry, you have less control over that. But that is why the radar system was very important. Because when we had the radar system, it would be able to pick up any vessel entering into the waters of St. Lucia at the various locations. So what we have seen happening with this government is that they seem to have relaxed a bit on the rigidity of being able to patrol our waters, to monitor our radar system and keep them operating. We used to have these metal detectors at the port. I was told what was not working, and that is where the K9 unit became a critical component. I travel all places over the world. You would just see the officers with the dogs would just walk and they would come by your bag and they would smell and they would move on. So we had a system here that was proven to be very efficient and effective. And the Minister of National Security and Prime Minister decided to disband this unit over a cost of $40,000. Now, think of one illegal firearm entering the country and taking the lives of 2 or 3 people. You think the if the government was, for the 3 years they've been in, if they had kept the K9 unit, they would have just spent about $1.2 million, $1.3 million on the K9 unit. You are telling me that with all of the effectiveness of that unit and what was happening, and that is where it is showing the weakness that we have within the ranks of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Because why isn't the force more adamant about the need for these the K9 unit? Because they say they need vehicles, they need motorcycles, they need maybe other metal detectors things. Why isn't there a stronger voice? Now we know it is not practical for the police to come and speak against the government of the day and to come, because the police must be seen to be independent in carrying out its duties. But what is happening behind the scenes? What is going on that nobody is responding to and saying that, look here, We rejoice over whistleblowers. We rejoice when people put out information in other parts of the world. So are there no whistleblowers to tell us what is happening in St. Lucia? Are people so scared of the government? It appears to me that people are more afraid of the government than they are of the criminals. Because they speak about the criminals, but they are afraid to speak about the government. And we are saying that the method of operation, what we are doing as a country, it's not working. It is evident. And the decisions made by the Philip JPL-led administration has led to the deterioration of law enforcement in this country. We saw the expunging of records or the people who were charged under the COVID laws. Yet still, the young men are still languishing at Bodily over the marijuana charges that the member for Denry North indicated that if he had the power and the authority when he was in opposition, he would have gone down there and taken them himself out of Bodily. What has he done for the last 3 years that his government has been in office? So our crime situation, what we are seeing, the number of illegal firearms that are circulating in this country, and the amount of ammunition that we see. We hear people are celebrating fire in gunshots. This is a very scary situation that we are faced with. And the government is increasing its security with bodyguards. Even ministers who are not entitled to have bodyguards, they have bodyguards. But the rest of the population is in trouble. And the last point I will say on this is, they continue to protect the victory, but St. Lucia is not being protected. It is the country that needs protection. It is not the victory that needs protection. Because if the country is protected, then the victory is protected.
I want to ask you, Deputy Leader, about this new crime prevention ministry that you've spoken about. So we saw Jeremiah Norbert, the member for Miku North, being appointed as the Minister for Crime Prevention and people with disabilities. We know that Mr. Norbert used to be a police officer, and we expect that he understands from the ground up the crime situation and what steps can be taken to mitigate or to try to solve that issue or keep it under control, because it's been argued that crime cannot be solved. Make the comparison for us. Instituting a new ministry as opposed to putting in measures like the CCTV camera network, the K9 unit, strengthening the marine unit, and strengthening our borders. Cost. What is the cost of putting in these measures as opposed to putting in a new ministry?
So we have a situation where every citizen who buys anything in this country is paying the levy or the tax towards health and security. And even though we know that the government misled us, because this levy was really to facilitate a loan, but the money is collected anyway. So have we seen the expenditure reflected in the ministries? In the ministry, we saw a reduction of $3 million in this year's budget, 24-25 budget. There is a reduction of the allocation for crime fighting. So why are we as citizens still required to pay? And you know, there are some things you don't put a value on in terms of, and when I say value, I mean a value in terms of monetary value. So you never put monetary value on a life. There's no amount of money that you can pay that is worth the life of an individual.
But take us through those measures. How effective is it? The measures that you guys, the opposition has been calling for, the CCTV cameras, the K9 unit, versus the cost of starting a new ministry. What is the comparison? Where do you believe, do you believe that with this new ministry, crime fighting in St. Lucia will become more effective? Do you believe that the government should forego this ministry and put money into measures to mitigate crime in St. Lucia?
Well, it is obvious, and it's early days, but it's obvious that the number of ministers you have fighting crime is not going to reduce the crime, because it has not happened. These are administrators, these are policy makers. So what new laws? Because the perception about the roles and responsibilities of ministers is very misguided by the Labour Party. When you say you give a minister the Ministry of Crime Prevention, the job of this minister is really and truly to be able to enact policies and to be an administrator, not an executor of the program. So we have to go back to our law enforcement agency, which is the police force. Now let's look at what is happening. We have somebody who is acting commissioner. You have a deputy who still holds the title with very questionable issues in relation to this individual. What is the status of the investigation? Where is it at? You have a minister responsible for national security, and you have the Home Affairs Minister. The Home Affairs Minister was responsible for the passport office, and there was this issue with the briefcase and the issue of passports, and they told us there was an investigation. Have we heard anything about this investigation? We saw the complaints lodged against the individual who was tipped to become the commissioner of police. And these were serious allegations. There were reports made. What is the status of the investigation? So for the government to say, okay, I believe that the Prime Minister created this portfolio to divert attention from himself for his failure as Minister of National Security. So you have somebody to blame for the crime, because if his title is crime prevention. So we are spending resources in the wrong places. Whereas if we had proceeded with the CCTV cameras, that vehicle found at VG, you know at what time it drove to get to VG, where did it come from, where did it originate? Because even with the street lighting program that we had embarked on when we were in government and we had gone into contractual arrangement, that was supposed to come with 1,500 CCTV cameras that would be placed at every major intersection in St. Lucia. So anywhere a vehicle left and moved to another place, you would be able to trace the movement. Because today it is artificial intelligence, it is technology that is the most used in crime prevention and crime fighting. As we speak today, you will install cameras at your home and you will see all the imaging, and not even that is admissible in court. Now, if you go to appoint ministers to say, to carry out functions, but you do not have the necessary legislation, I mean, it's like washing your hands and wiping it on the ground. That is what this Labour Party administration is doing. And I've said it. We have 4 people who we should be looking up to in terms of crime fighting and crime prevention. That is outside of the law enforcement. But you have a weak administration at the police level, because one of the persons at the top, there are questions. And unless and until you clear these issues, people will continue to doubt. There are people, you have a minister of government saying to the population on a talk show that he has police officers feeding him with information, giving him files on individuals. Is he a private investigator? Is he somebody, or what is his involvement in crime fighting in St. Lucia? Is he the de facto head of the police force? Is he really the minister in the Prime Minister's office with responsibility for crime fighting or for national security? Now, if Richard Frederick is in charge of crime fighting, or if he is the minister in the Prime Minister's office with that responsibility, then every St. Lucian should be afraid.
Very valid points, Mr. Deputy Leader. Before we close off, I want to ask you about the budget allocations. You mentioned that there was a reduction of $3 million in the budget for, was it national security? Okay. We also know that there is no additional allocation to the Ministry of Justice. How is this going to affect prosecutions and the rule of law in the country?
So, the Bible says, because sentence against an evil worker is not speedily executed, the hearts of men grow more wicked. When there is a delay in justice, when there is a delay in prosecution, when there is a delay in holding people responsible for what they have done, it emboldens other people to think that they can get away with it. And the wise man Solomon said that in his wisdom he had tried everything under the sun, and he was the wisest man who ever lived. And if he is advising us that when you do not act in a timely manner on issues like this, so when you have the DPP's office, when you have in the budget of 2024 that it is written and it is stated that the department has inadequate staff, they do not have sufficient resources and allocations, and we have seen the backlog of cases. We are hearing that at Bodile we have almost 600 people. Maybe half of that is on remand, trying to get a trial. Are there innocent people sitting, languishing in jail today? And I'm not only criticizing the Labour Party, both parties over the years have had issues with the backlog of cases. So I'm not going to say that the UWP's hands are clear and clean on this, but this has been a work in progress, and we saw the progress that we made. The DPP's office got more resources under the last Alan Shasney-led administration than any other period of time I can recall in the recent history of this country. Yet still, what we have seen is a return to what it used to be. So, we can pay people with all fancy names and titles, but this does not solve the problem. When you have to wait 3-4 years to hear a case that could be resolved in a month or two. So there's the lack of magistrates. I mean, take a simple example. I had a case going on there. I've won my case at the CCJ, and we can't even get a judge to sit on the matter. Nobody is saying anything. The leader of the opposition has 3 or 4 cases that a judge recused himself from, citing political interference. The only political interference there should be is to give the judiciary the necessary resources that it is required to function independent and free and clear of government involvement. But when a judge removes himself from a case, citing political interference, and the Chief Justice have said nothing, the Prime Minister went to court, he said, to see that justice was done for one of his colleagues, that he wanted to get away with what he had done. We have reasons to be concerned about the law enforcement and the justice system in this country. And now you have ministers, so when you ask this minister, they will tell you. When you ask the Prime Minister, he tells you, I'm not a police officer. So if you know you're not a police officer, and Norbert was a police officer, why didn't you give him the Minister of National Security? Because you said, don't ask you about that, because it's your father that was a police officer. So when you have leaders like this running the affairs of a country, we're going to be where we are. There's no, and I see no hope. We have been betrayed by this Labour Party government. Everything that they promised has not been delivered. We have a situation where they promise one thing and they are doing the direct opposite. So really and truly, there's no reason to hope, but we cannot let St. Lucia go down the drain at the hands of this incompetent government. And that's why we call on civil society and every other concerned St. Lucian, whether we have to take to the streets, whether we have to call on the government to resign, whether we have to call on the government to change course, we all need to lend our voice to this happening.
Thank you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Senator Dominic Fede and new flights for the summer months.
So, this is goodbye. A professional one. A meticulous one. One with unique options. And total support. With multiple locations, we are focused on your hour of need. And so, this is the final goodbye. Be it traditional, at sea, or cremation, the Crick family will be here to help your family during life's most difficult moments. Crick's Funeral Home, telephone 452-2780 and 459-9212.
Paying is faster and easier with Flow FastPay. Use your MasterCard or Visa and pay from anywhere. Log on to discoverflow.co/fastpay and press Consumer. Select your country and enter your account number. Enter the amount to be paid and an email address. Enter your credit card information. You'll receive a payment confirmation with the transaction details, along with a receipt to your email address. It's fast, safe, and easy. Flow, keeping you connected.
Lucilex remote options are available to serve you every weekday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Call or send a WhatsApp message to 285-6796, 285-7859, 285-3593, 285-3329, or 285-8640. Or send an email to customersupport@lucilec.com for assistance. Lucilec encourages you to use the available options for doing business with us remotely.
Welcome back. What is your take on this? Because recently at a roundtable discussion, you gave scathing reviews on the performance of the tourism industry. With the influx of new flights, both regional and international, what do you think is going to happen, or how do you, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What is your take on that situation?
Well, there are just two new flights. One is actually JetBlue, and the other one was American Airlines, and they've both put on a second daily flight. They question as to whether the government has the wherewithal and the capacity to fill these flights to sustain the loads in the summer months. That question is left unanswered. So we wait and see. We want to welcome the airlift situation improving, because if I can tell you, last year we lost 13 flights a week, and that was a pretty grim situation and affected us significantly, where we had the worst summer in the history of tourism development in St. Lucia. And so what this will help is the recovery of the destination. We still have some ways to go in terms of surpassing where we were in 2019. If you look around the Caribbean, you will see that 11 countries have surpassed their pre-COVID numbers. It's taken St. Lucia a mighty long time. We should have been over this by now. We shouldn't be talking about recovery 4 years after the pandemic. And it really has exposed the government's own ineptitude, their mismanagement of the sector, their lack of focus and their lack of direction and leadership of the sector. Now, why do I say this? I say this because it affects the livelihoods of people who are within the tourism industry. So if you think of whenever a hotel have low occupancies in the summer, the people that are disadvantaged, it's not the minister. The minister gets his salary whether the occupancy levels are high or not. But we can't say the same for the housekeeper in a hotel. We can't say the same for a guy who's a bellhop. We can't say the same for a guy who is on rotation because the water sports department doesn't have enough guests. We can't say the same for someone who's working in the spa, a waitress, a chef. All of these people are placed on rotation when occupancies are low. And then hotels do something that I laugh at every time. They close for renovation. But they are forced to close because the occupancies are low in the summer. And so we must deal with that problem to anticipate the low arrivals, and so that we can create better arrivals. It's about arrivals, and I know people oftentimes like to hear that you're talking about other things. But if we're going to establish businesses in the community, if we're going to establish small businesses, restaurants and tours, and we will encourage St. Lucians to invest, as the policy makers, we have to make sure that there's business for those small businesses. So if we are below where we were in 2019, that can't be a very good position for us to be in. While 11 destinations around the Caribbean have already surpassed their COVID-19 numbers, they have recovered and now they are growing their destination. They have overcome the challenges of COVID.
Speaking of recovery and the community tourism initiative, we now have an agency, a community tourism agency, that is actively engaging small business owners, actively engaging people who want to enter the tourism industry. And we see an influx of bed and breakfasts, we see tours. Recently, the CTA launched their first business. It's a tours company, an ATV tours company in Beauséjour. We applaud the efforts, of course, of the CTA, but how is this impacted? Because you're saying to me that we're still in recovery. So being still in recovery, do you think it's a good idea to go out and engage these St. Lucians and have them make these investments in the hopes of, having arrivals. What do you think about it?
So I think you have to optimistically look to the future, and you have to overcome. My criticism of the government is that it has taken them too long to recover. We should be growing from where we were in 2019. Each record set by successive ministers are set to be broken. I want St. Lucia to do well. I want the destination to surpass the numbers that we left in 2019, which is still the highest on record. But because ultimately when the destination does well, then these small businesses do well. Now, it's very interesting that you have said that after 3 years of being in government, that the community tourism organization has launched their first tour company. So it means that all they've done in 3 years is help one small local business. No minister of tourism can take credit for the proliferation of Airbnbs around St. Lucia. This was all done by St. Lucian nationals themselves. As early as 2010, they saw opportunity from the emergence of the booking platforms like Airbnb. And Airbnb, what it did is that it equalized tourism. It made it an opportunity for small tourism businesses to become even better. Before Airbnb and VRBO and other booking platforms and Booking.com, it was very difficult that if you have an apartment at your home, for you to gain exposure on the internet. Very difficult. You would have had to invest in your own website, might not have been cost effective. You would have had to invest in some digital ads and ad campaigns. That is extremely difficult when you have one room. Airbnb, VRBO, Expedia, Booking.com, they all do that for you. So I laugh when I hear the Minister of Tourism trying to take credit for the proliferation of the non-traditional accommodation sector. None of us can. St. Lucians did that all by themselves. What we must do is to improve the enabling environment. We must make it easier, and we must build on that momentum that was created by the St. Lucian people themselves, that entrepreneurial spirit which exists. We must build on that and expand that. So our government established the policy thrust. I mean, if you go into the records of the ministry, you will see that we were the ones that established village tourism. When the government came in, all they had to do was to set up the office. But we negotiated the lease. The landlord was already reconfiguring the office space for the Village Tourism Agency, which this government renamed Community Tourism Agency. The policy thrust of technical support, we had already received the funds from CARICOM Development Fund, $10 million, which was placed at the Development Bank. And this was for grants and for unloaning. But we needed to be set up before we could actually offlend the grants and the loans to the tourism SMEs. So the financing, the legislative policy thrust was there, the physical location was identified. There's nothing wrong, I always say to people, that if one government plants a seed, that another government may water that seed and another government may reap the harvest. That's life. Life is a continuous process, and development is a continuous process.
Okay. We've also heard the introduction of 2 new airlines. One is set to start on April 15th. It's called Air Delphi, and this new flight is supposed to link St. Lucia to St. Vincent and to Martinique. And according to the SLTA chairman, they're anticipating the introduction of a new regional flight. Talk to us about the benefits of having St. Lucia, having a flight from St. Lucia to Martinique, for one, connecting the French Caribbean, and also of having new regional flights, because we know that regional tourism, regional travel has been a serious issue in tourism.
So what we've done is that we have been without air connectivity to Martinique, our largest regional market. Trinidad is number 2. And without that connectivity to Martinique, it did affect our arrival numbers from that destination. However, I'll say to the chairman that we welcome this, but however, this does not represent growth again. We're recovering. We are building back things that were already there before. We had daily flights to Martinique, and I recognize that we're only having 3 flights. There weren't details as to the level of equipment that they're using. Is it an ATR? Is it a Dash 8 plane? So I'm not aware of how many seats that will be per rotation. That detail is very important so that we can make a complete assessment as to the impact of this new arrangement. Air Delphi, I wish it well. I hope it's a sustainable business venture, and I hope that it can withstand the volatility that may normally affect smaller aviation companies. So I'm happy for St. Lucia, and I'm happy indeed for St. Vincent, because our original numbers fell out from the bottom. It's really affected, a lot of small hotels, a lot of inns and apartments, and a lot of these are owned by St. Lucian people. So that market is very crucial to the trickle down and the tourism dollar flowing into communities.
So we've heard reports that some regional governments are looking to relaunch LIAT. What is your take on this? We know LIAT is a contentious subject. LIAT it is near and dear to the hearts of Caribbean travelers. Everyone, when LIAT was in the skies, everyone was complaining. When LIAT left, everyone missed them. But do you think relaunching LIAT is a good idea? And do you think regional governments should get back on board with the resumption of LIAT in the market?
So, history is replete with examples of public sector airline companies that have failed. Airline companies historically have been a drag on the public finances of respective countries. And my own view is that the aviation industry provides an opportunity for sustainable private sector investment. Let it be a business that is going to turn over a profit. And I think that is going to realize the sustainability of the aviation sector. If you get into the whole business of seeing air travel as the need for government to subsidize it, that's not sustainable. What has happened to LIAT may well happen to any new venture. So we have to have the right business model to make sure that it is sustainable, that whichever host country is the host hub do not re-engage in some of the atrocities of the past, like, for example, stacking LIAT with jobs and making it a political entity where some politician may want to give a job to a supporter, and LIAT was stuffed with all of these people, where the cost and the expenses got out of control. We have to be very careful on the liability that we will take on. In fact, St. Lucia wasn't a shareholder, but the taxpayers of St. Lucia had to pay the outstanding liabilities, severances, and so on to LIAT employees while we were not a shareholder and while we weren't responsible. So by getting involved makes us even more liable for other things that we will not be able to escape if we were to enter into a formal arrangement. I watch with intrigue the position taken by 2 governments in the region, 2 of LIAT's shareholders, and that is Barbados and St. Vincent. After many years of putting in a lot of money, those governments decided that they couldn't allow that anymore, and they couldn't allow their taxpayers to go through that. I mean, if you take St. Lucia, we can't even fund our hospitals properly, and we can't fund our education systems properly. Our school plants are in a state of disrepair. Our roads are in a mess. To divert funds that are needed very badly in these areas to put into a regional airline, to me, is suicidal, and to me doesn't reflect the main priority for the majority of St. Lucians. So I would say we have to be very careful. And I would say that public sector involvement in airlines, it has a very slim chance of that venture being a financial success.
Thank you very much. We've come to the end of Beyond the Headlines. I am Eldridge Charles. Join us next week for another episode.
Great Vision Designs, we value our customers and provide cutting-edge customer service. Great Vision Designs specializes in television broadcasting and live streaming of funerals, sports events, weddings, meetings, shows, and more. Call us today at 722-6542 or 726-9914. Or follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Great Vision Designs, coverage you can count on.
Lucilex remote options are available to serve you every weekday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Call or send a WhatsApp message to 285-6796, 285-7859, 285-3593, 285-3329, or 285-8640. Or send an email to customersupport@lucilec.com for assistance. Call 457-4433 to get bill balances. Use myaccount.lucilec.com for detailed account information and to make online bill payments using a credit or debit card or online bank account. Customers may also take advantage of SurePay's online or walk-in service. Lucilec encourages you to use the available options for doing business with us remotely.
So, this is goodbye. A professional one. A meticulous one. One with unique options and total support. With multiple locations, we are focused on your hour of need. And so, this is the final goodbye. Be it traditional, at sea, or cremation, the Crick family will be here to help your family during life's most difficult moments. Crick's Funeral Home, telephone 452-2780 and 459-9212.
Paying is faster and easier with Flow FastPay. Use your MasterCard or Visa and pay from anywhere. Log on to discoverflow.co/fastpay and press Consumer. Select your country and enter your account number. Enter the amount to be paid and an email address. Enter your credit card information. You'll receive a payment confirmation with the transaction details, along with a receipt to your email address. It's fast, safe, and easy.